Can we go through the range of emotions and thoughts we had on Wednesday from 1 o'clock Eastern on through the end of the night? 1 o'clock, of course, being the time that the big man news dropped. And then by the end of the night, the Sixers moving on with a very convincing showing without Joel against Washington.
Yeah, for me, it was tough. Well, first I was hoping that it would just be okay. They'd say, hey, it's day-to-day just because of soreness. I was hoping there was no injury at all. That's what I was hoping for. And obviously that wasn't the case, so that was tough. Then they said day-to-day. I said, okay, well, he's not ruled out yet. So now let's try to focus on the game. Once he's not out, let's focus on the game. Let's put that to the side temporarily. Then before the game, he's on the court, and that's impossible to ignore. Like, people are paying attention to it. You can't just act like that didn't happen. So now it's like, oh, wait, that might mean he could play soon. Oh, maybe he'll pull a Willis Reed and try to play tonight. There were people saying that. Then the game starts, and they can't make shots early. It's like, oh, no, could this possibly be a game 6? And then the second half happens. They explode. Shots start falling, and then they get Washington up out of there. So it was definitely a roller coaster for me, for sure.
I was right alongside you, front row of the roller coaster. A really interesting day, but honestly not that abnormal when you think about the year that people have gone through, the years that Sixers fans have gone through. Awesome to see it end the way that it did. A lot of angst on Wednesday, and really good to see the guys galvanize, come together, get the job done. I agree with you. I think that second half, just like everything started to click. I think Danny Green's play at the end of the second quarter is something that we are not talking about enough. Seltz and I just did a Twitter space, Tyrone, and it was a lot of fun. We did not mention Danny Green a single time. And so now I feel like I have to. Well, maybe we did. I don't know. Anyway, Danny Green at the end of the second quarter was so important. And I just can only imagine what he was saying to the guys in the locker room at halftime for them to come out the way that they did. I think that was a pivot point, and you don't often see pivot points right before halftime. But I was really pleased to see Danny Green. I mean, the experience that he brings on and off the floor, I think was on full display, whether or not we actually saw it last night.
Yeah, he's an extremely important player, in my opinion. I think he's an extremely important player, has been all year. Fans were frustrated with him at times in the regular season, but you just see having that experience, like you said, just makes a huge difference. And there might have been guys who were a little bit nervous or worried about this closeout. Oh, what are we going to do? Seemed like he wasn't worried about a single thing, and that's despite the fact in the first half he wasn't making shots. Didn't matter to him one bit.
It's a cliched narrative to say, well, when you lose the best player on your roster, one of the best players on the planet, an MVP candidate, that everyone's got to put all their hands in. It's all hands on deck and band together and give it your best. But that really was the case for the Sixers in the win in Game 5. There were some who shine brighter than others, but really when you dissect the game, and Lauren, I think Danny Green is a great case in point, there were various junctures of the game where different guys stepped up, left their fingerprint on it, and helped the 76ers take care of business on Wednesday. Seth Curry, he started the season strong. He went through the situation after testing positive for COVID. We all know why he was brought in, and he was fantastic in Game 5. He sought out how Will Nato exploited that matchup, put up a 30 spot, which was great to see, and it was certainly timely. That was not a wasted 30-point effort by Seth Curry.
No, not at all. It was his best game as a Sixer at the absolute best moment. And I think that was something about we probably didn't know about him coming in, because last year, if you paid attention to him at Dallas at all, he didn't have the ball a lot. So he was pretty much just asked to be a stand-up shooter and that straight-up shooter, and that's it. He could put it on the floor a lot more than we probably realized, and we saw flashes of it throughout the season. But between the health and the dribs and drabs with the different lineups and the different responsibilities, it never fully came together. I think you saw like the fully formed Seth Curry game last night. And now I'm actually intrigued about what it could be going forward, because now that's one more thing on film that Atlanta or any possible future opponent has to pay attention to. You know, if we close out on this guy too hard, this guy can put it on the floor and make us pay, and not just scoring. He also was able to distribute. That was a really, really good game. And I think that's very encouraging for those that are worried about Joel Embiid to have that anxiety that a player can not only just score, which we kind of knew he could do that, but can do it in so many different ways. That was big.
It's a great point. He is, I think, Lauren, a well-rounded player. I know that at the beginning of the season, I think some of the chatter, it seemed like, from some of the fans was like, okay, we got someone like Seth Curry, and maybe he can replicate the type of role that J.J. Redick had when J.J. was here. J.J., fantastic, elite at what he does. But there's more to Seth. Like he's got a well-rounded offensive game that can hurt you in a couple different ways.
For sure, and it's relied upon more when he's no longer the fourth or fifth option on this team. Seth Curry is, statistically speaking, one of the greatest shooters to ever play this game. But right now, he's a fourth option at best when you come into a team with Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, and you're playing alongside them. Really, really cool to see him be able to activate those sort of all-time good skills that he has that don't get called upon that often when everybody's available, and then see him rise to the occasion when those skills are needed. It was a pleasure to watch him last night.
Game 4 was wonky, obviously, because the Sixers were dealing with the Joel Embiid situation. And listen, if I'm a basketball player and I see a potential MVP go down, go back in the locker room, there's just human nature things that, for me speaking only, it would be impossible to avoid. So hard to really know what stock to place in Game 4. I thought Tobias Harris, who understandably saw more coverage and more tension once Joe went out in Game 4, Tobias came back in Game 5, really versatile effort. I thought that he had a really, really strong series from the start in Game 1 to how he wrapped things up and helped the Sixers put a bow on it in Game 5.
Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
I was just going to say, it's interesting that you talk about Tobias having a well-rounded series because that's what he's wanted to do. And he came to the Sixers just over 2 years ago in 2019, and he expressed that his goals were to become a reliable scorer for this team and to become a closer. That became a bigger goal for him as time went along. And I asked him about that after the game. Have you accomplished those goals? And in a very Tobias Harris fashion, he said, well, I think I'm getting closer. He said he likes the progress he's making towards accomplishing those goals. But if I had to assess it, I think he's become both a reliable scorer and a closer. And should Joel Embiid not be available for any more games, that's going to be continued to be relied upon. But when Joel comes back, it will also be relied upon. And Tobias Harris is that guy now. Even if he's not willing to say it, I am. He is that guy, and I'm really impressed with the way that he came here, he set the goals, he signed a new contract, and then he continued to get better. You don't always see that, and so I really admire the work ethic and the will that he's put into his time as a Sixer.
For sure. And one thing I noticed when he first arrived, teams would hire, I remember one particular time where they put Kemba Walker on him in a playoff series, and he wasn't able to make Kemba Walker pay. Now, if you put a smaller guy on him, he makes him pay consistently, and he did it throughout this series. Game 4, like you said, got a little wonky. There was a lot of help defense, Gafford and other guys laying back for him, so it wasn't really any single coverage once Embiid was out of the game. But pretty much throughout the whole series, he was able to exploit whatever matchups came against him, and I don't think he was very good at that. I mean, not trying to rip him when he first arrived. He's a totally different player in that way now. And I think going forward against the Hawks, there's no place for anybody to hide because they're going to have to put a real defender on him. And if they think they can stick Trae Young on him, well, he's going to score 50. Like, that's not going to happen anymore. While the previous 2019 version, maybe he would have settled for shots and allowed the team to get away with putting a little guy on him. They're going to have to put Hunter, like a real defender on him, or he's going to score 40, 50 points. We saw 37. I think that 37 could have been more, especially the way games 2 and 3 went. He could have scored 40, 50 in some of those games. I think he'll still do that if they don't guard him correctly, and that's very different than when he first arrived.
You know, Tyrone, a lot of people, the buzzword with Tobias this year has been decisive, more decisive. That's something that Doc has talked about, wants him to be more decisive and how that's helped unlock his game. I also think he's been more physical. To build on your point, like he's not afraid to take the smaller guards down to the block and impose his physical will on them down there, just as ready as he is to pull up for a jumper at the elbow or something like that. I love it.
Yeah, the one other thing is I like that sorry to cut you off, he's been such a willing shooter from 3. At times, I thought there was times where we're like, why aren't you taking that shot? Let it fly. Who cares if you miss? Because now if they come out on you, he can just do so many things. He can score at all 3 levels. So it's like, don't not take those threes because you can score from out there. You can score from the mid-range. You can score at the basket. I think he's showing all 3 levels, and that has to be tough. And that's versus Randall. If anybody watched any of that Knicks series, he became a very one-dimensional, pound the ball, and I don't know what I'm going to do type scorer. You mentioned decisive. He's been extremely decisive at all 3 levels. He's a tough cover now.
Decisiveness, aggression, and we haven't even talked about defense. That might be the place that I don't want to say that where he's improved the most because of how much he's improved offensively, but it's meaningful improvement on the defensive end. Tobias Harris is not a liability on defense. He's not someone you have to hide on defense. He's someone that takes pride in his matchups, and that's something, again, He expressed that he wanted to become a better defender, that he wanted to be relied upon on the defensive end. And now he's doing it game after game after game. And adding defense to your game is a difficult thing to do. So the fact that he's really put in the work, his teammates said it back in training camp, that Tobias is often out there running with cones, making sure he can figure out defensive opportunities in the extra time, right? And scorers like to put in work scoring. Tobias Harris clearly putting in work scoring, putting in work defending, and now we're seeing the rewards of his hard work.
I'll be honest, for me, there was a lot of the I wonder factor about Tobias coming to this year. I wonder how he was going to respond to how things went in the bubble. He, for me, took care of that within like the first month and a half of the season. I wonder how much of the regular season good we saw would translate into the playoffs. Took care of that this round. I think that Tobias has earned the benefit of the doubt. I think he has proven that he can score in volume, score in a lot of different ways, like we talked about, better defender, and he can be that option in crunch time if the Sixers need someone, especially now. We don't know how long Joe's going to be out for.
Yeah, there were so many good performances in this series, and the Sixers, frankly, were just better than the Wizards in addition to everything else. But they had to go play like they were better and show it, and you just saw it. And he was just better than everybody on that team. As great as Bill was, he gives you nothing on the defensive end, for example, like just absolutely nothing. He gives you something on both ends. He was fantastic.
We are taping this, Tyrone, before your Thursday edition of Mike's show. 19-10, 11. 2 block shots for Benjamin. What type of feedback do you think Benjamin will get over the next 48, 72 hours?
See, it's probably going to be unfair, whatever it is. Likely, I hate to say it's probably going to be unfair because the foul shots are a huge thing. The hack-a-bin, he's killing them. Then they tried in the first half, which was just cowardly, by the way. Cowardly effort by Scott Brooks. I really respect what first half, come on. Anyway, he makes 2 once, and then all of a sudden your genius strategy falls apart. But the guy, it was fantastic. We know the one thing that he doesn't do, and people are always going to harp on that. I can't harp on that every single day. I'll go crazy thinking about one particular thing every single day, year round. But if you can just get past that, please. He was incredible. He was incredible last night. First of all, one of the only flaw in his game defensively, people say at times, was rim protection. He was excellent at the rim from the second half of the third quarter through the end of the game. I think he just had to get comfortable because he hasn't had to do it that much because usually it's the big man of Dwight Howard back there. He was excellent at the rim. He's excellent roaming. He was excellent he was aggressive. Another big moment was that he recognizes a smaller guy, and there's been at times where he would give the ball up. Not last night. Puts his shoulder into his chest, goes right to the basket. It's a smaller guy. He sees a bigger guy. He's quicker. He goes right around him. He was doing everything that we've been asking. So we should at least have a 24 to 48 to 72-hour moratorium on ripping the guy. I mean, wait till he plays another basketball game because he was fantastic in the one last night. And I'm not going to be worried about what happened before. He was great last night. Give the guy a little bit of credit. I'm not saying forever. If he has a bad game, no one's above scrutiny. But goodness gracious, he was great last night on both ends. Let's just give the guy a clap, and let's wait for Atlanta and then decide if we're going to be mad again.
I don't have a lot to add, Tyrone. I think, though, that Sixers fans, Philadelphia fans are very, very passionate. And if you're going to pick him apart for what he did in Game 4, what I'm asking is you bring that same energy to celebrate him in Game 5. Just match your energy. If you're going to be mad, please now celebrate him. 5 for 8 from the line. Dwight Howard also 8 for 10 from the line. Talk about sort of fixing what people are talking about. But Ben is also paying attention. And Ben posted on Instagram last night, and his quote was, "They love me not. They love me not." And I loved that from Ben because he's listening, he hears you, and he's proving you wrong. And he's not afraid to gloat afterwards. And that's exactly the type of energy you want from your athletes. He's engaged with this community. He wants to do right by this community. And now it's time for the community to do right by him. And I don't know what's going to happen in Game 1 of round 2, but I think it would be really nice if everybody could just celebrate Ben for what he was able to do last night. He was wonderful. He's been great all series, great all playoffs.
And another thing that post does is there are fans sometimes that feel like they can't wrap their arms around him because his personality is just plain different than Joel Embiid's personality. He was just born different. All three personalities are all different too. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes fans feel like they can't get to know him. Well, that's showing some personality right there. Now, hey, hey, you got to take those lumps. People were ready to kill the guy because he missed a couple foul shots in a game they barely lost. So yeah, some of that same energy, you should have to accept some of that same energy. But I'd like the human factor. Whenever a player shows who they are, I think that's a good thing. And it's just, I think that there are just times where we might go too far. Yes, we're passionate, but let's not pretend like the guy's not excellent at basketball. We know what he does and doesn't do, but no, we know what he doesn't do, but we don't ever spend enough time talking about what he does do, I should say.
Seltzer, you on mute?
I think I've been doing this long enough to figure out the.
No, this will never have been done for long enough.
There are a couple instances that stand out to me the most about when this happened, that Ben was able to tune out noise and respond. One was in the middle of March or earlier when there was a lot of talk swirling, tuned that out, went about his business. And he came back after game 4. He said, I'll be all right. Came out and did his thing. So I agree. I think that fair treatment, criticism, praise is certainly a valid thing. As far as big takeaways from this series, for me, I thought Tobias, his general steadiness was one. The other, and I'm going to go inside my psyche. I know no one really cares, but I know Joel Embiid got hurt in game 4. I know the Sixers lost game 4 and the series came back, but I was okay going to bed that night because I saw number 0 nearly help the 76ers steal the game and end the series in 4. And then Tyrese Maxey comes back in game 5 and electrifies the crowd. Great offensively. Love it. His tenacity on the defensive end and willingness to get after it, I love just as much. I think for me, guys, hopefully we see more of Tyrese Maxey. Hopefully he continues to earn his minutes. But if the best we see was what he did in these last 2 games in the first round, for me, that fills me with a lot of hope of what's to come.
Oh, absolutely. And, I remember during draft night as it comes down, because he was not supposed to be there at 21. I remember the Miami Heat had the 20th overall pick. And I have to be honest, I was 100% sure they were going to take him, and I was going to be upset. And I was like, he's going to help them, and now what's going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. And then instead, they don't take him, and then the Sixers get him. And he starts off the regular season really well. Then he goes into a rookie low. I think playing so many games in such a short amount of time was probably tough on him physically. In addition to mentally, he's so positive, but he had to get tired along the way. Now it seems like he's got that second wind. It looks like he's not a rookie anymore. Westbrook had absolutely no hope of staying in front of him. So then they switched to Ish Smith, and Ish Smith had no hope of staying in front of him. And then they switched to Neto, and Neto had no hope of staying in front of him. I think you're going to see him more in the second round, and I honestly don't think the Hawks have anybody who can stay in front of him either. Now, is he going to be the single-handed reason why they win a series? Probably not yet, but I really feel I think that his time actually is now. I think you are going to see more from him, but it was so good. And there was a stretch there where him taking it to the basket and distributing, he had like 9 shots up in 9 minutes. He needed to go get his off the bench at one point, and I love to see it because he wasn't afraid of the moment. Those are the things you worry about with a rookie. He wasn't afraid of the moment. He was aggressive. He was effective, and he didn't try to do too much. No crazy turnovers. Like, I have nothing negative to say about the kid, and I honestly think he's going to help him more this season.
I think, Lauren, that speaks to the environment also that he's in right now, too. There might be some rookies who come in who had high hopes of going in the lottery, and if they don't, they get disappointed, and they're like, I'm on a playoff team or contending team, and I might not get my minutes. Well, he took that situation, and he was ready for the final couple of weeks of the regular season. He's got the gears turning of Doc and the coaching staff clearly, and he made the most of it when the minutes presented themselves, and here he is in a key spot. It seems like the veterans, and I know, Lauren, that you're in those Zooms and you're talking to everyone on the team, the veterans, I feel like they surrounded him in a good place to just focus on the task at hand, talked him up throughout the year, and kept him perhaps mentally ready as much as anything else.
Yeah, earlier in the series, Tyrese said that when he was little, his dad told him that proper preparation prevents poor performance. I knew I was going to get it wrong at some point. I got that tongue twister right too many times, and now I'm paying for it. Tyrese has been preparing behind the scenes all season long, and he didn't even get the regular preparation that a rookie would get, especially coming into a really good team. He didn't get summer league. He didn't get a traditional training camp. He didn't get to come to Philadelphia and work with a player development coach and acclimate to the city and then meet his teammates one by one as rookies usually do. We talked about it with Seth Curry. It's tough to be on a team with Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris playing ahead of you. Tyrese is someone that's way farther down on the depth chart than Seth Curry is and has been all season long. And even so, he's found a way to make an impact over and over again. He's come into the rotation, out of the rotation, back into the rotation better than he was before he fell out of it. And that's also worth celebrating because it's really hard to improve when you're not getting those minutes. Seltz and I talk about this a lot, Tyrone, but when you're a rookie and you come into a really good team, it's difficult to get minutes. You don't get to take risks. We saw it with Matisse Thybulle last year. We've seen it with Tyrese this year. Mistakes, you have to pay for them. If you're a rookie on a bad team, Trae Young benefited from this early in his career. You get to go out there, make mistakes, and figure it out. Tyrese was not given that privilege, and he's still figured it out. And I think that's really worth celebrating, and now we're getting to do it, and the city is rallying behind him. I'm not surprised after watching him all season to see how well he's performing in this playoffs, but I think it's really exciting, and again, worth celebrating.
You mentioned, Lauren, the Atlanta Hawks. Good segue. Because here they come, 1 o'clock Sunday afternoon. We know that at the center, round 2 underway. I got to be honest. I felt for the great Lloyd Pierce. I thought he was a good hire at that point in time for Atlanta. Didn't work out. And to Nate McMillan's credit, man, the Hawks, they were the 3rd best team in the NBA since his hiring. Tyrone, what do you think are, well, we certainly know one of them, but as we take the holistic look at the Atlanta Hawks, what are some of the big challenges they present in your mind?
The number one thing for me that comes right to mind is running guys off that three-point line. I understand that you may or may not have Joel Embiid. I don't want to speculate on what his status might be, but one thing we do know is those guys want to fire threes, and they're much more effective out there than Washington is overall. I think you have to go into the series with the approach of we'll have to accept guys making some tough twos at times, some scrambles, but run guys off the three-point line. And I think if you do that, now you can create problems for them on the other end because while their defensive profile has improved greatly under McMillan, I don't see personnel that's built to slow this team down. They'll have a good scheme, a better scheme, much better scheme than Washington had, and better personnel overall than Washington has. But I think that if you can run them off the three-point line and make them uncomfortable, you then can then score on them and get more easy baskets on the other end. If they're comfortable and they're able to take easy three-pointers, now it becomes a more uphill battle. The Knicks ran into that a couple of times in that series where they're playing tough defense, they're playing scrappy, those guys make shots, and then, oh no, they have no way of coming back. Obviously, the Sixers are better equipped to do that, but running those guys and not letting any of them, including the one who takes the 50-footers, keep those guys from being comfortable at the three-point line, to me is the first thing that comes to mind in that series. If they do that, it's much easier than if they can't do that.
Looking at their personnel, right, they have a handful of three-point shooters that are above 37.5%. Bogdanovich obviously jumps out. Lou has shot the ball great since he's gotten there. Tony Snell, we saw a couple times when he played the Sixers this year, go off. But the thing about Trae is he's not afraid to launch from anywhere. So I don't really care what his percentage is. He can change the game if he gets hot, and you can't let him get hot. And the other thing, the one thing, and I'm with you, Tyrone, I take, especially at this stage, a very zen approach when it comes to guys who are in or out. Like, it's either going to happen or it's not. It's outside of my control. I can't get my energy wrapped up in it. I think the presence of Capella obviously changes whether or not Joe is in there or not. If Joe's in there, Capella, not particularly concerned. I think that Joe's certainly acquitted himself pretty well against him in the past. But if Joe's not there, then I think that presents a decision for Doc to make as far as how he's going to work that 5 spot and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because then it changes to a dribble penetration situation where a lot of Capella's points, they don't throw to him in the post and he goes to work. That's not what he does. The guards penetrate. It is a skill to find the right spot and play with energy and all those kind of things. With Embiid there, Embiid could really shut a lot of that down. If Embiid is not there, then it is tougher then to stop some of that stuff that they do. If they are able to run guys off the three-point line, that dribble penetration leads to a lot of his baskets, and he's very effective there. He's a guy that can literally shoot 10 for 10 in a game because all the shots are within 2 feet. None of them are difficult, and then he'll grab 10, 15 rebounds to go with it without calling a single play for him. So, yeah, in that way, you're absolutely right.
Lauren, anyone who you have your eye on, Sixers side, that you felt you saw some flashes of things in the first round that you could see building on that in the second round?
Yes. You'll be unsurprised to hear that my answer is yes. I want to talk about Furkan Korkmaz for a second. he didn't figure super heavily into the first couple of games. And this is a guy who, when hot, is so dangerous. You always have to account for him on the floor if you're a defense. To see him come into game 4 and along with Tyrese Maxey keep the team in a very difficult situation, the two of them were what was really driving that fourth quarter. Furkan had all 7 of his points in the fourth quarter in game 4, and then in game 5 to come in and score 10 points. 4 for 8 from the field, 2 for 5 from 3, and 2 for 5 from 3. That's fine if you're Furkan because they have to guard him on all 5. And I think that a lot of the times, more than 2 of them fall when you're Furkan Korkmaz. So look, to me, I don't know how heavily he figures into the upcoming series, but he's someone that can be relied upon. Like Tyrese Maxey will come in and rise to the occasion. I loved seeing him close this series the way that he did. Doc Rivers often says that when Furkan's shots are falling, when Furkan is playing well, it usually means that the rest of the team is playing well too. So if you're using Furkan as sort of a litmus test, especially if you're going to be shorthanded, to see him finish this series successfully, again, not sure how heavily he's going to play in, not sure how many minutes he's going to get, but when he gets them, he's going to capitalize on them. And I've really enjoyed seeing him succeed in this situation. Seltz, I know you're also a big Furkan Korkmaz guy. He's just a good human as well. And so you got to root for those good humans.
I think he gave some good energy, especially in game 4. He and Tyrese Maxey almost helped the Sixers steal it. I think it would certainly help if Furk can build off what we saw the last 2 games, because as Doc said, he feels like the Sixers could need him at some point. Why don't we wrap with this? Obviously, Tyrone, I think that when you have someone like Trae Young on the opposite side, if you're following the Sixers, your first thought is, well, we've got Ben Simmons, and he can just go after that and try and shut Trae down. I don't know. How do you think Doc might approach that matchup? It's obviously going to be one of the key matchups of the series because there are some guys, whether it's DeAndre Hunter or John Collins, who have some size and athleticism who could get inside a little bit. And I'll be curious to see how much time Ben spends on Trae and maybe most of all, what stage of the game they put him on Trae.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. And also to kind of go hand in hand with the Korkmaz thing is Thibault, because it's almost like if you combine them, you would get the greatest player to ever live, because you'd have somebody who can really, really make shots and somebody who can really, really defend. If I'm not hoping, if Joel Embiid is out, he went with Thibault as a starter in game 5. Does he stick with that? And then it's very simple. Thibault, you're guarding Young pretty much every possession, and if you get in foul trouble, then we can try something different coming off the bench. That's the player who I think would be the biggest wild card, who may end up spending a lot of important minutes on him because he's long enough, he can get the trail block, he's quick enough, and he still doesn't get all the calls that he probably should as an elite defender, but he gets a lot more than he did as a rookie. So he might be able to play just physical enough to make the catches for him a little bit easier, to fight over that screens and stay with it, and just make those shots from a guy who, like you said, who can blow the game apart. Just make it a little bit tougher for him. So that's one thing I'm really looking for if Joel Embiid can't play. Now, if Joel Embiid is there like we all hope, now he can come in and he can really play loose with his fouls and play really overplay him at times. And I think making him uncomfortable, something the Knicks did for exactly 0 seconds of the series, could be just huge. And he's probably the best player equipped in the whole league, perhaps, to do that and not have the offensive responsibilities that Ben Simmons obviously has.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And I think that Matisse spending as much time as he's had to on Bradley Beal over the last few days is going to prove really formative. He said after the game last night that guarding Beal taught him a lot. It was a crash course in guarding. He called Bradley Beal one of the greatest scorers in the world. I agree. So having that experience and now going to one of the other, Trae Young is also one of the greatest scorers in this game, but younger, a little less experienced, a little less likely to get into Matisse's head the way that Bradley Beal was, because Bradley Beal, Matisse said, was able to start anticipating him. And now they're just anticipating each other, and it becomes this just weird back and forth. And Matisse got some of his, but Bradley Beal got a lot of his. I don't think that Trae Young can read defenders the way that Bradley Beal can. So Matisse had some good warm-up reps in this first set. His hands might be even more full. Like you said, if there's no Joel, does he just come in and your job is to just run with Trae? Best of luck. Please slow him down. I agree with you. If anyone is going to be forced to go run in there, use your motor, use your athleticism, and use your skills, it's a good series to have Matisse Thybulle on your side.
I'm ready. I think maybe I could use Thursday off, but after that, we could start game 1 of the series Friday. I'm just intrigued, excited, curious.
Yeah, now we got to wait a while. Yeah, Sunday now we got to wait. Come on.
Well,
that's right.
Spin
At least it's 1 o'clock.
When you're and when some of your bigger players might need a little bit of rest.
Sure. Yep.
There is
This
a
is a
certain
good
big
thing.
man they say are going to use rest and rehab. Perhaps the extra couple of days of rest and rehab could work out well for the Sixers.
One might
That's a
say.
great theory that I would be willing to subscribe to. All right. You see Tyrone, you hear Tyrone just about everywhere this time of year during Sixers season. Thank you, man, so much. Really appreciate it.
No, I'm thrilled. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.